Hello, everyone. Welcome to my talk. My name is Brittany Roberts, and my paper today is titled The Soviet Anthropocene, Desiccation, Desertification, and the Horror of Animality in Dmitri Svetozarov's Hounds. Dmitri Svetozarov's 1989 film Hounds begins with an intertitle displaying a verse from Revelations, which an unseen narrator reads, "And power was given to him to kill by sword and famine and pestilence and the beasts of the earth." The verse speaks of the four horsemen of the apocalypse, specifically of death, who, in the Christian tradition, will usher in the apocalypse. Calling attention to the destruction of the planet and the uprising of the beasts of the earth, the message foregrounds from the outset the hostile attitude the film will take toward human pretensions to environmental mastery. Underscoring this attitude, the opening scene shows a young boy wandering a desert landscape in search of water. Oops. Sorry. As the boy passes a large dog sitting among industrial ruins, the film's soundtrack shifts, filling with eerie howls that cascade among the ruins. Hearing the sound of something approaching, the boy looks up, but it is too late. As he screams, the camera zooms into his eyes, in which the dog appears reflected. The boy's corpse is then shown distorted underwater, and moments later, the title Hounds appears juxtaposed over the body in blood red script. The beasts of the earth, it seems, have risen, challenging the human exceptionalist discourses of the Judeo-Christian West. Svetozarov's brutal film examines through an eco-horrific lens the devastating environmental consequences of Soviet water diversion programs enacted in Central Asia in the 1950s. Set in a village near the shrinking Aral Sea, the film's unnamed city, like the dogs, has been abandoned. The formerly lush seaside landscape is now empty, barren desert. Left behind as their owners fled desertification, the dogs prowl in marauding packs, their howls levying accusations against the humans on whom they prey. Like the sea desiccated by Soviet environmental policies, the dogs no longer bend to human sway, making a mockery of human claims to mastery. As a squad is dispatched to exterminate the now monstrous dogs, the canine beasts drive them mad, one by one, beneath the punishing desert sun. The film's environmental critique raises questions useful to studies of horror, Soviet thought, and Soviet contributions to the Anthropocene. What are the limits of human influence over nature? And most critically, can we ever truly exercise mastery over the planet and the animals with whom we share it? Considering key scenes from Hounds through the lenses of environmental and animal studies, I argue that the film challenges Soviet myths of mastery over nature and animals, presenting a biting indictment of the human exceptionalist philosophies that undergirded Soviet environmental policy toward the more than human world. Once the world's fourth largest lake, the Aral Sea began declining in the 1950s when Soviet engineers diverted water from its main tributaries toward Uzbekistan. With the Aral Sea's main water supply diverted toward industrial human use, the Aral Sea began to shrink, resulting in what Richard Stone has referred to as perhaps the most notorious ecological catastrophe of human making. Reflecting the human exceptionalist attitudes characteristic of the Soviet Union, efforts to master the Aral Sea culminated in an apocalyptic landscape haunted by death, in which multiple species, including humans, disappeared across decades. Indeed, many commentators on the Aral Sea disaster described the region in terms inflected by apocalyptic registers, testifying to the disaster's ability to, quite literally, end the world, in the sense of troubling the Soviet distinction between self and world. By revealing the connections between self and world and human and non-human that Soviet environmental policies repressed, the Aral Sea disaster laid bare the environmental consequences of human activity and the lack of human transcendence over nature on which Soviet scientific rhetoric had largely been based. Svetozarov suggests that it is in such Gothic landscapes that we can find the four horsemen of the apocalypse invoked by the film's intertitle, and to which the film's human heroes will ultimately be sacrificed. In Hounds, animals reemerge from the domesticated spaces of subordination into which the Soviet project had tried to fit them. Here, domesticated animals do not act the way they are supposed to, attacking their former human masters instead of staying in their designated ontological place. The film's second scene highlights the strangeness of this undomestication event. One Soviet official, whose beliefs prevent him from considering that a dog could have risen against human control, investigates photographs of the boy's mangled body, exclaiming that only the devil knows from where they, meaning these brutal, man-eating animals, came. Indeed, while trying to determine the species responsible for the boy's death, he declares that it must be some kind of strange wolves who have begun to approach the city itself. Though incorrect, the official's conclusion is telling. His human exceptionalist attitudes not only prevent him from ascertaining the true threat, but also cause him to displace responsibility for the boy's death onto a wild, untamed species, a species thus further removed from the human world over which he perceives himself to have mastery. The man's comment reinforces the film's critique of human exceptionalism and its responsibility for the hellscape brought about by the Soviet Anthropocene, in which animals, like the Aral Sea, are broken, behaving in ways that blur the boundaries between culture and nature, that over which the human does and does not have mastery. In an effort to dispossess the city of the threat posed by the animals, the Soviet authority in charge of the investigation dispatches a team of men on an expedition to exterminate the animals, thereby returning the city to human control. The first to be chosen is Ivan Maximchuk, a nervous bureaucrat who quickly announces that he loves animals but has hated wolves since childhood when he read a story in a magazine about ancient mythological creatures, which he calls white wolves or werewolves. Ivan quickly assembles a team whose mission, to exterminate the man-eating animals, is a mission to put animals back in their rightful place, literally and philosophically, a mission aimed at both reclaiming the town for human use and at redrawing the borders between nature and culture, human and animal. For Ivan and the party whose interests he represents, order can only be restored by expelling the animals from the city, placing the animal firmly back on the other side of the boundary. Despite the bureaucrats' best efforts, the group's misplaced sense of both Soviet and human exceptionalism portends the mission's doomed status. This becomes prominent when the group stops at an abandoned building marked 1957 PSO Vodnik, a building meant for Soviet water workers that, in a jarring visual disjunction, now lies stranded in a vast expanse of sand. If the characters are unwilling to confront the human Soviet responsibility for the region's plight, the water's disappearance is underscored by a visual insistence on the building's label, registering both the region's environmental decline and the ways in which it impinges upon spaces previously understood to be under human dominion. Indeed, shortly after their arrival, the group sights one of the region's wild dogs, the same who killed the young boy. The dog's silent, looming presence against the building and Gothic Anthropocenic landscape suggests the failure of the Soviet philosophies clung to by the party and the members of the expedition themselves. In the biblical framework presented by the film, the Aral landscape serves as a deconstruction of the Edenic myth of human dominion. As the intertitle reminds us, the Eden of the Aral Sea has become hell on earth, in which old logics of human mastery must be rescinded. The team is forced to confront this new environmental order when, awakening to discover their van being robbed, they witness a pack of dogs tearing apart one of the would-be thieves. After shooting the animals and inspecting their bodies, the men recognize at last that their animal opponents are not wild beasts, but formerly domesticated dogs. Upon realizing this, they experience shock and horror. This is not how dogs are supposed to act. The image of the snarling dogs signals a severing of the hierarchical connection between human and animal that Svetozarov draws out to great effect. Lingering over the dead thief's mangled corpse, the camera zooms in to show his missing eye, partially eaten intestines, and blood-spattered body before panning over the similarly eviscerated bodies of the dogs. The images here show these two scenes and the visual similarities between their corpses. The matched images of human and animal, corpse and corpse, underscore a simple truth. As Matthew Calarco states, we are in deep and fundamental ways like animals, despite the fact that to be human typically means to disavow the fact that we too are flesh, that we too are meat. As Tobias Manelli and Margaret Ronda similarly argue, while other species differ from humans in their behaviors and bodily forms, their essential likeness becomes vividly evident when the shared substance of life spills from the body. Blood bespeaks corporeal vitality at the point of its vulnerability, life and its capacity to die. In the unusually violent scene for Soviet cinema, in which both human and animal bodies are made vulnerable, Svetozarov emphasizes that the men must begin to rearrange their conceptual frameworks through which they have been apprehending their situation. And indeed, sorry, and indeed their relations to a more than human world. Long accustomed to thinking of themselves as masters of nature and animal life, the reversal in power represented by the dog's increasing hold over the town robs the men of the confidence with which they began their mission. When they discover that their van has disappeared, their environmental vulnerability, made clear not only by the dog's presence, but also by their lack of water, the blistering sun, and the sinking quicksand that surrounds them, leads them to despair and fear, a kind of madness that undoes their human status. If to be human has long meant for the Soviet system and the Western philosophical heritage it stems from to have control over nature, to be set apart from it and the animals within it, then the men now find themselves in an environment in which that label is meaningless. They are as vulnerable to death as the dogs they have slaughtered. Indeed, one member of the party is now so terrified of the dogs and of his own newly realized vulnerability that upon hearing his teammate mimicking the sound of the dog's howling, he falls into a coma, wets himself, and appears to die, forming a visual match with one of the exterminated dogs from the previous scene. And the images here show the man falling into a coma, then wetting himself, and then the visual match formed with one of the wild dogs who has also wet himself. And the new ecological order brought about by the fall of human mastery, Svetozarov suggests that the comforting separations between human and non-human, nature and culture have, like the Aral Sea, begun to disappear. After the man's apparent death, the members of the expedition find themselves in a terrible predicament. Distrusting each other, and with their means of water and transportation gone, they fall one by one to madness. Even Ivan, an extension of the Soviet system itself, is in despair by the end. Huddled behind the comatose body of his friend, he rocks back and forth, whispering that, quote, "It is for me the dogs have come." And the image here shows Ivan panicking in a room covered with the blood of the dogs. Divested of reason, increasingly violent, and with no escape from the desiccated region, Ivan and the hunters now find themselves with little to separate them from the beasts they wish to tame. As they inch closer to animality, the boundaries between human and animal, which seemed at the film's beginning firmly drawn, have all but collapsed. Svetozarov's final blow to the human-animal binary endemic to the Western Soviet humanist system occurs in the film's closing scene. Having exterminated most of the dogs by trapping and shooting them, 3 of the surviving humans attempt to leave, but are stopped by Ivan, now mad with terror and guilt. As they drag the dogs' bodies across the sand, Ivan aims his gun from a window and, whispering that they are white wolves, werewolves, fires on them, believing them to be dogs in disguise. Recalling his earlier statement to the Soviet investigator that he has been terrified since childhood of wolves, his fear and decision to fire on his team suggests his increasing awareness of the porousness of the boundaries between humans and animals. As Pramod Nayar reminds us, the human defines itself as such by denying the illegitimate animal within itself. by seeking an expulsion of the animal inside, as the presence of the animal makes the human monstrous. Ivan, unable to expel the taint of the animal, now sees his teammates as the monstrous animals he fears, opening fire on them and, moments later, himself. As the sole surviving members lay the bodies of their dead teammates in the sun, they collapse on all fours in anguish and, against the stark desert landscape, throw their heads back to the sky and howl. And the image here shows the two surviving men on all fours in the dirt. At the conclusion of Svetozarov's film, humans are stripped of all claims to mastery. Dehydrated, wounded, mad, and standing in the ruins of a collapsing Soviet system, all comforting separations between self and world, human and non-human, have been rendered illusory. Here, Svetozarov suggests that the end of the Judeo-Christian humanist world signaled by Revelations, the end of the world as it has been meant for humans, has already occurred. The two kneeling, howling men, one with his own dead dog's collar around his neck, are now near indistinguishable from the canine beasts they have been sent to slaughter. As the title Hounds once more appears over the dehumanized men, Svetozarov underscores a fundamental ecological truth, that we are all ultimately subject to a fate in common with our animal cousins, a fate that, especially in the context of the Anthropocene, we ignore at our peril. In the film's apocalyptic closing image, the human and wild beast are one and the same. As Giorgio Agamben has argued, the distinction between human and animal has long structured Judeo-Christian and Western thought. Indeed, without this distinction, one cannot conceptualize the human at all. He writes, perhaps not only theology and philosophy, but also politics, ethics, and jurisprudence are drawn and suspended in the difference between man and animal. When the difference vanishes and the two terms collapse upon each other, the difference between being and the nothing, licit and illicit, divine and demonic also fades away. And in its place, something appears for which we seem to lack even a name. Without the distinction between human and animal, we are confronted with something alien to Western thought, the challenge of conceiving of the human without relying on this difference. Svetozarov's haunting image of the men on all fours, which signals the annihilation not only of the Soviet world, but also of the Judeo-Christian anthropocentric principles upon which it has been built, can then also signal something else, the beginning of a conscientious relationship with the more than human world and its many animals, ourselves included. What Svetozarov offers at the end of his film is, in other words, the possibility of reconfiguring the human in terms of connection with, rather than separation from, a more than human world. As Agamben argues, this space must be handled with care, with consequences for our conceptions of both humans and animals. He continues, to render inoperative the anthropological machine that governs our conception of man will mean no longer to seek new articulations, but rather to show the central emptiness, the hiatus that, within man, separates man and animal, and to risk ourselves in this emptiness. To risk ourselves in this emptiness of the emptiness between humans and animals, then, to discover in the gap of between species instead a bounty, is perhaps to discover what it means to be part of a world. In the space of this deconstructed human, something else may emerge instead, something that will take our relation to animals not as a categorical difference to be abscised, but as a commonality on which to found more ethical ecological futures. Thank you.